So when I was talking about the value discovery workshop on that tool slide, one of the things that I mentioned is business scenarios, right? So we have 18 business scenarios that we've created, and basically what we do is we started to work with the product marketing manager on everything that is in Microsoft 365. What are the business challenges that we're seeing out in the marketplace today? And what we do is we create what we call generic scenarios, which is on the left-hand side. This is a sample of the 18. And then what we do is we go through an industry spin on it. So once we identify the challenges, we sit down with the industry experts, whether it be healthcare, government, education, I already said government, but there's 11 major industries that we actually sit down. We ask them, hey, if you think about this specific scenario, for instance, how would it map to your challenge specifically in your industry? So we do that once, and then we do it by roles as well. And what we get out of it is a very customizable version of all of the business scenarios by industry and by role. So you can imagine there's hundreds of permutations that we can get out of there. The 18 scenarios, the generic scenarios are right here. Less important are the words, but know that it goes across Microsoft 365, right? And when I think about Microsoft 365, on the very, very left-hand side, these are what we call the pillars of Microsoft 365. Everything that we do in Redmond, Washington, every features that we create, every product that we made, every update that we push out for Microsoft 365 need to align to one of these pillars. It has to, because that is what we call the investment area. So based on that 3 pillars right there, we have one more, but right now we haven't gotten any scenarios for it. But right now, based on these 3, we've created the 18 business scenarios. And very quickly, for those of you who are reading this slide, you can realize this is not an IT conversation. This is very much of a BDM conversation. So for instance, collaborate on documents to simplify and enhance team creativity in real time. On the very, very top, that is all about document collaboration, and do you have a process around it? So using these business scenarios to go drive that BDM conversation is the crux of what we do within Value Discovery Workshop, okay? All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the tool itself. And again, for those of you who have your device and want to play along directly on your device, feel free. Otherwise, you can take a look at mine over here. Transform.microsoft.com is the URL for anybody, for both partners and internal sellers as well, to go log in. So once you're here, you're going to see this page, and what you're going to do is click on this little sign in button as well, and you should be automatically signed in. Now for partners, if you're using a device that is a personal device, you can still get in, but it will require you to authenticate yourself a little bit more. But otherwise, you should be able to click on that and sign in. For those of you who can't, we'll make sure that we have a support team to help you address any of these type of technical issues as well. But once you're in, I'm going to go ahead and close this box out. This is the dashboard that you're going to see. When you first log in, by the way, you're not going to see any of the customers' accounts. What you're going to see is this thing called Contoso. And for those of you who've been working with Microsoft for a little while, probably know this. Contoso has always been our test baby. I actually don't know how it came about, but Contoso has always been it. So we decided that when we do business value program, we're going to put Contoso there. The reason I address that is because you can really do everything with Contoso just as you can with any other customer. So Contoso can be your test baby as well, and you can play around with it as much as you want. A couple other things that I do want to address is, for those of you who are going to be adding an account, and I highly encourage you to do this, is to click on this add account, because you're not going to see anything yet. When you click on add account, then you can type in the account name that you're actually going to be engaging with, and chances are it will be here. If it's not, then use the Contoso one by all means. But typically, I'll use an example that I have. So when I do this, when I type in State Farm, which is an insurance company based in the States, what that's going to do is look into our CRM system and find all of the opportunities that we have that is State Farm in the title. And what that does is spits out anything that we see, and you can click on any single one of them. If you happen to be working with an internal seller, ask them what the opportunity ID looks like so that you can help engage. You can see there's some unique identifiers over here. The CRM account ID is what we call the opportunity ID. Again, you don't have to memorize any of this right now. As you start to play with the tools, engage with the sellers, you're going to see more and more of this happening. So if you happen to know what the opportunity ID is, great. Click on that one. If you don't, just select the top one. It'll be fine. Then what you're going to do is create the account. So putting a seat count, right? So for example, I'll put in 75, putting a geography that makes sense to the customer. So for this one, of course, we're going to do United Kingdom. And then business segment is a new segmentation that we have in this new fiscal year within Microsoft. Again, for those of you who've been working with us for the past year, know that we've changed the way that we've segmented our customers, enterprise, SMC, SMB. If for some reason these names, enterprise, SMC, and SMB, don't mean anything to you, choose unsegmented. If it does mean something to you, choose the one that is correct for you. So I'll choose unsegmented. And last but not least, choose the industry that it's in, right? This is to me probably the most important part within the business value program. You want to choose the right industry because if you think back to the slide that I was just referring to, everything that we do within Value Discovery Workshop is industry specific, right? So it has an industry spin to it. So what you see, even though it all comes from the 18 generic business scenarios, once you go through that industry package and the role, things will change, the verbiage will change as well. So choose the right one. So for me, I'll choose hospitality. There's 11 major industries that we support. Again, I'll open it up. There's 11 of them. There's also what we call the SMB, which is small, medium-sized businesses. These are typically the smaller organizations, so we also have data for that as well. For the 11 major industries that you see up top, if your customer is not in one of these 11 major industries, choose the one that says commercial. Commercial is our catch-all. And real quickly on that is, it's impossible to have all of the industries in here that cuts across the entire world. So we have to start to pick and choose on how we invest in the program. So these 10 right here, from education down to retail, there's 10 of them. These 10 are what we see as major industries across the world. And it should align to the majority of the customers as well. Could you find one that is not there? Absolutely. I've done a value discovery workshop with literally an electricity company, and you can't find that here, and I would have to use commercial and then further edit the value discovery workshop to make it customized for them. All right, so once you do that, all you have to do is click on add account, and voila, you're good to go. That's all it is. I will not add this account because I've already added a bunch of accounts. So, but once you add, that account would now appear as one of the roles that you see right here. So once you get there, there's a couple other things I'll address right here. You can always change your industry. So if you need to change the industry of the account, you can do that as well. You can change the seat count by clicking on it. You can then retype in a number here. The last thing that I do want to address is this propensity that you see right here. Sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes when you add an account, you're going to see either high, medium, low, or blank, right? Real quickly on propensity, it's an internal model that we've built. It basically addresses one business question, which is how likely do we think this account to be moving forward in our sales cycle? Is it high, medium, or low? The way we came up with that is we take 3 buckets of data. The first bucket of data is anything that we have internal about the customer, and we have some stuff about some of the customers, which is, are they on enterprise agreement, right? Or what type of VL, or what have they deployed? What are they using if their telemetry is turned on? So all of that internal data, we have that, and I consider that one bucket of data. We also have a second bucket of data, which is any external data that we have about the customer. We, as a Microsoft, we purchase from third-party data lakes on the customer so we can see on their domain what are they looking for and what are they looking at. Again, at a domain level, not on the personal level. So we have that second bucket of data. The third bucket of data is anything that has been done with business value program with the customer in prior years or prior months. We take all of that data. There's about 1,600 signals. We shoot them into this black box. Let's call it black box for now. And the output of that black box then say through machine learning is, do we believe that this account would be high, medium, or low likelihood of moving forward. And therefore, when you add accounts, you're going to start seeing them as well in the propensity. For the blank ones, that means we don't have enough data for them, so we just simply can't say. The reason I do want to talk about that is as you start to work on these accounts, when you see something that says high, we have a very, very high hit rate on those. In fact, the ones that we've seen closing the deal this year, 90% of them, when you go back into business value program, were actually labeled high. So there's a pretty high hit rate in the sense that it does make sense and the machine learning does work. So that's one way you can start to prioritize the accounts that way. That's the last thing I'm going to address on the dashboard itself. Let's go create something, yeah? So I'm going to click on Mylan Laboratories, and you can do so with any customers. The moment you click on a customer, you're going to see this thing load, and then it's going to ask you what do you want to do. It'll always show you any of the previous content that you've already created. We call a package. That is something you can create. A package is no more than all of the tools that I just went through on the PowerPoint slide with you, the Value Discovery Workshop, CIE, Value Calculator, etc. So you can create a package. So for those of you who are doing this on your device, what you're going to see is not this blue box for the first time. Once you create a package, then it will always be there. You can always recreate packages if you want to, or look at package history. But for those of you who are creating the package for the first time, all you have to do is click on Create Package. You can name your package whatever name you want. It really is an identifier for yourself. And then create the tools that you want to use. You can have all 5, or you can just create the ones that you want. So again, just from acronym standpoint, Value Discovery Workshop, which is all about using business scenarios to drive that BDM conversation for Microsoft 365. Customer Immersion Experience, which most of you have heard of. It's all about show and demonstrating how our solution is going to be able to help them solve their challenges. Value Calculator, which is your calculator that you can use to drive that quant analysis. IT Roadmap is the one that you can drive the gamification process with the IT shops, up-leveling level 2, level 3. The last piece right here is a cost takeout tool that I did not mention on the PowerPoint slide, but the cost takeout tool is one quick way that you can start to identify, hey, Mr. Customer, what are you using today versus what do you have when you have Microsoft solutions. So you can start to compare the cost of the 2 different products. So if you have Tableau today, what would it be if you move to Power BI, for example? So what I'm going to do is create VDW. I'll create all 4 for now. And you can click on it, multi-select. I'm not even going to put in a name. And what that's going to do is start building the package. Once the package is built, we can start to edit some of the things. So what we're going to do for the rest of, at least before the break, is talk about Value Discovery Workshop. So we'll let it build. And I'll show you how you can customize a couple of things before you actually go into the Value Discovery Workshop itself. Any questions so far? Okay. All right. Once that's built, you're going to see all of the things created right here, and you're also going to see some quick action buttons on the right-hand side. We're not going to talk about that part today. The most important things are going to be the ones that you just created right here, right now. Now, before we actually go into the VDW, there's a couple different things you want to think about. Roles and scenarios. Again, this is going to be the most critical thing that you want to make sure you put some thoughts behind. I'm going to go ahead and click on this little pencil mark and go into roles. Now, what you're going to see is the roles are going to be aligned to the industry that I've selected. So for, in this case, Mylan Laboratories, this is a healthcare company, again, based in the States. I'm using that as an example. But that's also why you see clinician up there. Had it been in manufacturing, you would have seen a different set of roles. Had it been in any other industry, you would see the respective roles for that industry as well. We have 3 different sections when it comes to roles. In the top will always be industry aligned. In the middle will always be the horizontal roles that you typically would find in any other company, right? And marketing ops, HR, CEO, these type of roles will always be there. And last but not least, at the very, very bottom, we have something called the crowdsourced role. And again, part of it is machine learning. Based on the usage, based on what you guys type in, we're going to start putting things that we feel like it's missing because most people are putting it in. And you can always edit these names as well. So you can click on clinician, and maybe I'll say it's for clinician director in this case, if I can type. And I will not be talking to IT in this case, and let it be at clinician director in this case. More importantly is you would want to go into the scenarios as well. Again, I apologize. The words are probably a little small as well, and it's a little faint. But these are the 18 business scenarios. Remember the 18 business scenarios I was talking about? Now, this one is the same 18 business scenarios, but it has the healthcare industry spin to it, and it has the clinician spin to it as well. So everything that you see right here would have a little bit more of that flavor than it is on any other industry. So if you are playing directly on your device and you're going through this process, you may see different wordings right here. But you can already see, for example, develop world-class patient care plans on the fly by soliciting input and building consensus, etc. Right? So you can start to multi-select and select the ones that you want to talk about. And very quickly, you're also going to see it is broken down by the Microsoft 365 pillars that I was referring to. This is the part where a lot of people do ask, well, how do you know which business scenarios to go drive? The pre-selected ones that was already selected when I come in, that was done by machine learning. But what you really want to do is start to think about and engage internally with your own organization and figure out, hey, have you had a discussion with the customers and what are some of the business challenges that you can glean out of those? It's the same thing that we do with our internal sales team, which is, hey, when you're about to go do a value discovery workshop or at least drive this conversation, go make sure you talk to the partners who've been engaged on this account, or make sure you talk to your account team to figure out, hey, what are some of the business challenges that they're going through so that you can select the right one and select the best one to help you drive that conversation forward. That's one way to think about it. The other way is there's always going to be some quintessential business scenarios that's going to be important for most of the companies that you come into contact with. In the United States, oil and gas right now, there's a lot of lawsuits happening, right? Because of compliance issue and the lawsuits around it. So typically what we would do in the United States is when you have an oil and gas industry type of company, you would select a compliance related scenario, right? And that makes sense. And typically security in general is going to be a big key area that you want to focus on as well. So those are always safe to pick. Based on the conversations that you have, based on the safe scenarios that you want to go drive with the customers, select that one and click on save. And what that's going to do is update the current package to reflect directly within the Value Discovery Workshop, and we can then go in and check out what you can get out of Value Discovery Workshop. As this thing loads, one of the things I do always emphasize is Value Discovery Workshop. Don't think about it as you have to sit down with the customer for 4 hours, we have to drive, and there's a set agenda in that regard. We need to take a step back when you start to go down that route, and the step back is understand Value Discovery Workshop is meant for you to go drive a business conversation about Microsoft 365. Whether you do it directly in the tool or whether you take the contents out of the tool and present it, or you just simply have a discussion with the customer. Either way is fine. The whole idea is about understanding what their business challenge is, right? And whether you do it in an online format versus an offline format, that's less important. But we do have a lot of very, very rich content directly within Value Discovery Workshop that you can start to leverage. So let me just go in. You can launch now, or you can schedule one. I'll go in and launch now. And what that's going to do is open up a new pop-up page. And let's go through a couple of the meaty sections of Value Discovery Workshop. And then I'll pause. And then I'll see if there's any questions. And then I'd love to hear from you. Well, how have you been engaging with the BDMs today as well, using your own tools? So this is the beginning page of a Value Discovery Workshop. For those of you who may be working with customers who are not speaking directly in the English language, you can select the name at the top right-hand corner and actually select the language that you are engaging with. There's 26 languages right here. I'll keep it on English, and let's go ahead and click on Begin. And the part that you want to focus more on is the scenario discussion, which is what we're going to do today as well, at least this morning. But the agenda is always going to be this: introduction, review scenarios. There's a section called determine implementation priorities that I won't go too much into, and then a summary outcome as well, where you can download some of the contents that we've went through today. You can add to this agenda item by clicking on this little pencil mark, and you're going to see this pencil mark sprinkled throughout the dashboard, which we were just on, or directly in the Value Discovery Workshop. I won't create any additional agenda. Let's go right in and take a look at it. The introduction will always be 2 pages. I call this a page. You can call it whatever it is. You can call it a slide if you want to. But this introduction will always be based on the industry that you're in. So the reason, of course, you see a doctor in the background is because I'm in the healthcare industry. And the customer approved quote you're going to see right here is also going to be aligned to the industry. And this is really to help get the juices flowing. The next slide or next page you're going to see is the role that you've selected or created or modified and the business scenarios that you're going to be driving. So for example, I'm going to be talking about develop world-class patient care plans on the fly with the clinician director in this case. Do you agree with me, Mr. Customer? And hopefully at this point, if you're going to be going through the online version with the customer, they had already agreed to discussing this, or they believe that, or you believe that they have this business challenge that they currently do not have a solution for. With that said, if I were to go to the next one, then we're going to move into the scenario discussion. The scenario discussion to me is the meat. This is the entree, right, of any meal. And to me, this is where you're going to be spending the majority of your time. And again, I'll go through some of the things that you can get here. But I also want to share with you some of the other things within Value Discovery Workshop. But what we're going to do is spend a little bit more time on this slide, on this page alone, more specifically. Whenever we do a scenario discussion, it's always a before and after sort of process. This is the before process. Does your process look like this? And then if I were to click on the next page, it would be the after process. Just like any commercials that you see on TV, the before is always with kinks, inefficiencies, problems, issues, whereas the after process is always the smoother process, which of course using Microsoft 365 is going to create that smoother process for you. And right here in the middle, you're going to see both before and after. You're going to see this, what we call a storyboard. The storyboard is the content that we've created by sitting down with the industry experts to map directly with this scenario. Is this a problem that you see? So for example, it says a nurse's tasked with creating a patient care plan which requires input from all the clinicians around in the hospital or remote. The one thing that I do want to address is, does the storyboard always align to your customer? Absolutely not. Then why do we have a storyboard? It really is to get the discussion going, right? This is not meant for you to say, hey, just by downloading this and going through this process, this is exactly going to map to my customer. The point is to drive a discussion. So, does your process look like this, Mr. Customer? Oh, no, it doesn't. Tell me about it. What is your process looking like when it comes to this specific scenarios? That is when you become consultants, right? That is when you start to ask really good questions and figure out what are the challenges that your customer is going through. How do you know if you're asking the right questions or good questions? We put something down here at the bottom. If you scroll down to the bottom on the left-hand side, you're going to see a section, what you need to do. Think about what you need to do as attributes that you need to go activate in order for you to enable this specific scenario. So for example, it says easy access to all the content, tools, and people in the secure centralized repository. Very quickly, you can turn that statement into questions. Mr. Customer, do you currently have a central repository? Do you currently have access to see what people are creating? For the accounting scenario that I was giving in the very, very beginning with the CFO, do you guys have currently a way to actually cascade your information down securely as well so that people who need to see it can see it? People who can't see it means that they don't have access to it. Do you have a process around that? So very quickly, you can turn these sentences, sometimes you see 3, sometimes you see 5, you can turn them into questions that you should be asking your customers on. And the goal is to figure out, hey, Mr. Customer, do you agree with me that there is a challenge in business process that we need to fix within your environment with regards to this business scenario? Right, so this is also where I consider sort of the meat. You're going to be spending the majority of your time. Typically, when you're engaging with the BDMs, you're not going to have too much time. 30 to 60 minutes is likely the time that you're going to have every single time you have with the BDM. It's not going to be a 4-hour workshop. So for those of you who've actually heard our pitch for a business value program in previous years, we actually pitch it as you should do a 4-hour workshops. And we've come to realize that's just not the case. You're not. It's going to be very, very difficult for you to get 4 hours with the BDM. What's more likely, though, is a 30-minute phone conversation or a 60-minute face-to-face conversation where you can start to take some of the contents here, ask the right questions questions and figure out, hey, do you have this challenge? And if you do, great, we have a solution that we can help you with, right? And that solution, of course, is Microsoft 365. And this is the after process. It's a simplified process. Again, you see the same storyboard, but again, if you start to read the storyline around it, is it going to map 100% to your customer? Probably not, right? But the goal is not to map directly 100%, but the goal is to drive a discussion with your customer. Here at the bottom, you can see a couple different columns. Impact of not doing, fairly self-explanatory status quo. This is the things that's going to continue to happen. It's still going to be a bottleneck. Capabilities you need is the only time through Value Discovery Workshop that you're going to see us putting products on the slide, on this page. And again, the reason is when you're talking to BDMs, it's less important to talk about the product itself than it is to drive that business scenario conversation. But we do understand there are some customers who want to see product names, so we do put the product names. On the very, very right-hand side, you're going to see value your business gets. This is the first glimpse of what that value calculator looks like. So we pull some of the initial data out of the tool. So based on the seat count that we have for this account, based on the industry, what is the value that we typically see when they go through Microsoft 365 transition? And that's the cost-benefit analysis. Some customers do ask, hey, how do you get that number? I typically stop them and I say, we can dive into it, but we would need probably another 20, 30 minutes. How about we schedule a time with you next week and let's dive into the value calculator. And that's one way that you can start to drive this business value program all up forward with the customer, right? That is the after process. Had I selected 2 or more business scenarios, what the next page is going to show is the before process of the second scenario and the after process and before, after. The best practice has always been for us when we have 30-minute to 60-minute conversation with the customer that we only pick 1 or 2 business scenarios because first of all, you're going to be spending a lot of time and you have to add in, there's always going to be chatters, right? You're going to chat with the customers before and after, in the beginning and after towards the end of the meeting. So you want to build in that buffer zone. But the other part is you really want to ask the questions and have that deep discussion to figure out, hey, do they have a question and do they have a problem with this business scenarios? But the problem with selecting too many in the 60-minute time frame, and to me, 3 or more in the 60-minute time frame is too many at that point, is that you can't romance the business scenarios and you can't get deep enough. And at that point, you dilute your effort as well. So I typically say if you only have 30 or 60 minutes, select 1 or 2 business scenarios. And most people, quite honestly, just tune out after an hour. So when you start to go through this before, after for too many times, people start to zone out of that conversation as well. All right, that is the meat. There are other sections that I will touch on within Value Discovery Workshop, but I want to pause right there. I want to hear from you. How does this map to what you guys are doing? How does it map? Do you have an internal process? Do you have any tools that you currently use that you found very successful to drive a BDM conversation? I want to hear from you. Do you have, so let me ask this question. Do you currently have a tool in place or onboarding training for new folks joining your organization to drive a BDM conversation? No? How do you drive a BDM conversation today? You pick up the phone and you call up your CFO. If you can get the CFO, surely you don't tell them, hey, let me tell you about Credential Guard in Windows 10, right? You don't, right? They're not gonna. So how do you talk to BDMs today? Or you don't? Do you feel like there's a need to talk to the BDMs though? Yes.
So we do for Azure, but we don't have for this.
With the BDMs, you talk about Azure.
Yeah.
Wow. How do you talk about Azure? Is a fairly technical product, right? As we all know. How do you drive that with the BDMs?
Sure. So ourselves as a partner, we have 2 sides of our business. So we have our public cloud side of the business, and then we have our network services part of the business, which this would potentially fall into with those customers. Within our public cloud side of the business, we're quite well established, and we have specific pre-sales activity. So we have a go-to-market campaigning that goes out, so emails, LinkedIn, standard social media, to drive on specific propositions. We have specific workshops, pre-sales workshops with customers to work through their requirements. That drives through to proposals, proof of concepts, and move forward. So it's quite well established on that side, but for this side, this is quite useful because we don't have anything on this side of the business.
Right, and that's typically what we're seeing within Microsoft as well. Our pre-sales side of the business, demand gen, whether it's webcasts or whatever you can think of, typically align very, very well to one set of audience, which is typically IT, and we can talk about our products all day long, and we love talking about our products, but we fall very, very short when it comes to how do you talk to the BDMs, how do you drive that discussion, and again, the whole point is. The whole goal is when you pick up the phone and you happen to get in front of the CMO or the CFO or any director of marketing, you're not going to be able to get past them by talking about, I use credential guards with Windows 10, but it's a very important thing that I think IT should know, but you're not going to get past them by talking about that specific features, right? And typically features and functions of a product just don't work as well with the BDMs. So anybody else, how do you engage with your BDMs today? Any tools, processes that you found successful in your company that you feel you could share? Because if not, I would assume everybody's going to be coming in here and start using this to drive that BDM conversation. So our usage should go up, which is what I care about. And of course, the impact that you're going to see, hopefully.
Or how have you seen that these tools help to get with the BDM? What do the account
Great
teams
question.
are doing to get with this to the BDMs?
Great question. So the question is, at least with Microsoft, we are very good at talking to IT. But Paul, you want us to go talk to BDMs? First of all, sure, I can go in the tool. That's fine. I can go look at the content. I don't even have the relationship built with the BDMs. How do I get in front of the BDMs? And that's a classic question that we always hear from our sellers. Typically, what you would do is I would actually sit down with the IT folks and say, hey, this is what we're going to go through. But I don't go through it as I'm presenting to them. I go through it more as, hey, this is a before and after process of a discovery, value discovery workshop. But what's really, really more important, though, Mr. IT, is this value your business gets. Look at this. Take a look at this. What is the one biggest challenge that you currently have in your organization today within the IT scope to stay relevant, right? You want to stay relevant within your organization. How do you stay relevant? You got to prove out your value, right? How do you prove out your value? Well, guess what, Mr. IT? I have a way that I can help you drive that business conversation. If your BDM happens to be the one who's actually needs a little bit of a pull because they're making some decisions as well, let me go help you drive that conversation. I can go help you prove out the value with your BDMs by proving out, hey, what this looks like, by understanding some of their challenges, right? Let me do the legwork for you. After I do the legwork, I can show you everything that we've done with the BDMs and let you present the final case up to the CEO, right? Or whoever it is. That is one very, very quick way that you can give from your IT folks to your BDMs within the organization. It is to show that, hey, we have the necessary content to help you drive your value within your organization, but let us do the work for you, right? We can talk to the BDMs. We have the right contents. We have all the things that we need to go have that BDM conversation. The other question that some people do ask is also, how have we seen VDW or this type of content, value discovery workshop, unblock something, right? And for me, there's a couple different ways you can think about this. There was once literally a CEO who walked out of what we call an executive briefing. So we do executive briefings around the world and also in Redmond as well, where companies come and meet and discuss what our products are. And we had a CEO literally walking out of the executive briefing because the roadmap that we presented didn't align to what their roadmap was. And that's fine. It happens. But what we then do is afterwards, after the executive briefing, we went back to them and we went back to what we call a digital transformation director in that company and say, hey, guess what? We understand that didn't go as well. Let's take a step back and let's firstly understand what your business challenges are. would something like this interest you? If I were to present to you a business case around your CFO or your whoever it is on this challenge and this scenario, and if I can show you that we can actually help solve that, would that interest you? And that's sort of how we unblocked that deal and started to get the conversation going again, right? And that was a very, very powerful thing. What they didn't believe in the roadmap, right? The customer didn't believe in our roadmap, or that they didn't feel that it was aligned to what they're thinking about. But what we then do is take a different angle of attack and say, you know what, that's fine, we understand, but let's figure out, do you have a business challenge? And let me show you how we can actually help you solve those. And that actually helped to get the juices going. By all means, this is not the only thing that's going to help you close the deal, right? You're going to have to do much, much more than that. But this is what we've seen to kind of kick off that conversation with the BDMs, to get them to start talking to you, to make them believe that you do have the capabilities and function to actually help them. All right, questions, keep coming. Anything? Feedback. Yes.
Can you please wait for me?
Hold on, no.
Typically, who within Microsoft would deliver the business value program from start to finish?
Great question. Who in Microsoft? So most of the time, what we do is the SSPs or solution specialists within Microsoft will be the one delivering value discovery workshop. More and more, also what we're finding is account executives are very interested in learning about this because it helps unblock, lubricate the system, if you will, and actually start to go down this path with them. A full-blown workshop, typically, I think about it from an SSP standpoint. Depending on the comfortability of the SSP, sometimes it could be the TSP doing a customer immersion experience, which requires a little bit more of a product knowledge. The IT roadmap that I was talking about on the slide on the very, very right-hand side, that is typically more of a TSP conversation using our, again, internal roles. Here's a fun fact for all of you. So across the world, we've done so far about 2,500 VDWs. And you can think about VDWs as a full-blown online version. Mr. Customer, let me walk you through that. Or, hey, Mr. Customer, guess what? Do you have 15 minutes? Let's go grab a cup of coffee. Let's go have a discussion, right? Either one is I consider as a value discovery workshop. Now, the latter, it would require you to do a little bit more of legwork in order for us to actually see that in the system. But anyways, I digress. The point is, out of the 2,500 value discovery workshop, actually half of them are already done by partners. So partners are fully in play in this program. And for those of you who can see the value, once you start using it and once you start to actually have that discussion with the customers, it becomes much, much more easy to figure out how do you drive that conversation. Here's another tip, and a lot of people do ask, I don't know what these business scenarios are. There's 18 of them. That's a lot. I don't know which one to select. I've already talked about how to select. It's an art and a science to that point. For those of you who are interested in learning about the 18 business scenarios, the easiest way to do that is to go into the tool. When I was selecting the scenario, right, remember that I selected one scenario, which is this one that I have on the screen. Select all 18. Pick all 18, go through the process. There's a PowerPoint, which we'll get to. There's a PowerPoint at the very, very end where you can download. A lot of people, and we tell our internal seller, the way to go learn about these 18 business scenarios, select all 18, go to the very, very end, download that PowerPoint so that you have it on your device, and at lunchtime or before you go to sleep, you can read a couple of the scenarios, right? And again, the scenarios are storyboards, right? They're not meant to map 100% to the customers, but really is to start to getting that thought process going on how do you drive that BDM. That's the easiest way to go learn about these 18 business scenarios.
Quick question: do you see yourself using this, or what else will you need to start using this? Do you see yourself using this? Yes. Okay. Does anyone feel it's not exactly for me. I will need to change this, add that in order to start using that. Any comment? No?
Oh, sorry.
Just a quick one. Really. I mean, I think, yes, definitely. That's why we're here today, is to really learn how to pitch better to the BDM audience. So I think the content within this looks like it'll be really valuable, particularly by industry and job role. I think if it's tailored in that way, I think we can definitely use it. But I think it's a case of getting into the tool, using it and playing around with it and seeing what's in there.
Thank you.
Anybody else that you feel something's still missing, something's not there? Yeah? Hold on.
Well, I've not used the tool as of yet, but there's bound to be something missing. Exactly what's missing, we can't predict. But this is where we have to use our own intelligence and build upon what you can share. So we add our own value to it, because you can't spoon feed us with every single thing we need.
Yep.
At the end of the day, if we're being realistic, which is.
Yep.
So again, it's our value add to make that differentiation.
Yep. That's actually a really critical point. So I will continue to emphasize this throughout the entire session today. There's no way that we can build a perfect tool, a silver bullet, where you just simply show and be able to close the deal. That's impossible. What we aim to do, though, is create enough of a content that's interesting for the customer so that when you do go drive that conversation, you can take some of the contents and be able to utilize some of the things you can hear to go help you drive that discussion. Driving the discussion is the hardest part because we typically just don't have that muscle to drive a BDM conversation. But once you start to get used to it, then it becomes actually fairly easy. You just kind of go with the flow and understand what the process looks like. But yeah, absolutely. Will require your work as well in making sure that you understand how to use the tool, go in the tool, play around with it. The easiest way is go in and just set up a VDW and see how you would run it with a customer that you're currently going through and see how you could benefit from it as well. Yeah.
You said that there's a consultant that we can engage with. Is that a free of charge engagement? And what levels of seat opportunity size before, because I work for a small reseller, not like some of the people sat in the room, and we find that since August last year dealing with Microsoft is painful. And I'm just curious to find out, because we've started using this already just to sort of set the scene.
Yeah.
And we've won significant pieces of business because it asked a few more questions than we would never ask. But we've got a couple of large opportunities, so how do I engage with the consultant, and am I going to get trampled on by the big boys that are all sat in here now wanting the consultancy?
Would you like to take that one?
Yes. Well, in fact, we are going to cover all the program in the afternoon. But the good thing is that you are here. You are the ones that are the first. It's fair to say that are the first one that are going to be the preferred one to go into this program to have access to the consultancy. Okay. So
we'll cover that. We'll
cover that, and all of the people in the room will have access to that
Yep.
consultancy.
There was right here, this gentleman.
Yeah, I think they're an excellent tool set, but I'd be interested to see if you've got any recorded examples of where these have been used, whether they're genuine examples or mocked up examples. It'd be nice to see them executed, just to see how they flow. Is that something you have?
It's something that we are actually creating right now. So that's a great point that you ask. A lot of people do say, hey, we can see the value, but can you show us a real life example or at least a mock-up? We're creating that piece of content right now as we speak. The unfortunate thing is we can't get it directly with the customer because of confidentiality, but we can certainly think about how do we create the mock-up example, and that's something that we're going to do. Once that's created, we'll definitely make available to all the partners to take a look at as well. Keep in mind though, I'll say this, there's no way that we can, in a mock-up example, be able to think about all of the type of conversation that you can imagine. This is a very fluid conversation, right? So there's probably no way that we can tackle all the angles that it could possibly be asked, but at least you can start to see how do you execute something like this? What do you ask? How do you ask it? That is something that we aim to do, and we'll make that available to you as well. Questions? Yes?
So is there a way that you can sync this at all with any CRM programs? Because, for example, I'm working with a client at the minute who has a very, very large client base, and their biggest problem whenever using a program like this is transferring all of that information from one to another, and that's sort of the inhibiting factor that stops them from going into a lot of different programs that we sort of tried to offer them as a solution.
So are you saying, is there a way that you can have an API to pull the data from here, put it into, say, your own CRM system so that everything syncs together?
Yes, exactly.
Let me find out about that. I don't know what the legality part of it is. I can find out and I can address that. During the break, let me take down your email address and let's communicate on that one. Yeah, with our own internal tool, our own dynamic CRM system that we're using, right now we haven't gotten that connection either. So but that's a function of the engineers need to work together, less on the legal reason. But when we need to think about extrapolating the data or extracting the data from this to the external source, I do need to go check on the legal part of it. What other questions? Yes, or comments, feedback.
So if we're working through this and then we've got like an account manager and a LSS potentially aligned to it from Microsoft, are they able to log in and see what we're doing?
Would other people be able to see what you're doing?
Yeah.
No. So again, part of it is confidentiality agreement that we cannot share things among each other. What you can do though is if you are working with the LSS or anybody else within Microsoft, or anybody else, you can actually share the work with them directly. And then once you do that action, they can then see what it is that you're working on, and they can actually co-edit with you as well. But unless you perform that action, nobody else can see what you're doing. We track in the back end, but we don't share that data in terms of who's doing what, but we track in terms of usage on who's using the tool. Okay, so hopefully this helps at least help you gain some understanding around what we mean when we say value discovery workshop. I'm a little sensitive to the word workshop, right? And I suspect that we as a Microsoft will be thinking about what is a better way to think about it. To me, this is more of a value discovery discussion almost. That discussion, right? And to me, it's more of informal than formal. We've seen more success doing this in an informal setting. In fact, that is the reason we started to back away from saying, hey, you need to go engage 4-hour discussions with the customers because frankly, it just doesn't happen. Based on the feedback from our own sellers, what they've said to me is, doing this as an informal setting takes away any of that rigid format that you would have to do in a workshop. Imagine the day you say to your customer, hey, Mr. Customer, let me set up a value discovery workshop with you next week, Wednesday at 3 to 4. Now all of the pressure is on. Well, it's a workshop. You got to make sure you have the content. Can you drive that discussion? Does the customer know what a value discovery workshop even means? All of that then becomes very, very rigid. Whereas if you simply have a discussion with them over coffee for 30 minutes or tea, what you can do is go through the framework that we've built and start to ask the questions, again, over tea, and try to understand what is it that they're having issues with. That has always been more successful for our sellers and our partners as we start to think about how do we scale this program, right? So I would encourage you to think about this less as a workshop than it is a discussion where you want to drive with the BDMs. And the whole goal is, of course, to understand what type of issues that they have. So with that said, again, stop me if there's any questions. Let me just keep going and finish this value discovery workshop. This third section is going to be implementation priorities. To me, I'll be fairly frank on this one. I typically don't do this part. When I do, there's a reason behind it, and I'll talk about why that is on both sides of the coin. So, but before I do, implementation priorities is all about if you pick 2 or more business scenarios and you had limited resource, limited time, money, whatever it is, how would you prioritize which one you would go after? As a customer, how would you prioritize which one to go after, right? So what we do is divide up into 3 different buckets. You can see adoption ability on the left, technical complexity in the middle, and business impact on the right-hand side. And what we ask the customers to do is rank. The higher the number, the more business critical it is. And it's a summation process at the very, very right-hand side. So you can see 3 right now. Had I select, let me just select 2 on the adoption ability, you're gonna see then it turns to 4 at the very, very right-hand side because it's 2, 1, 1. And you can start to rank them by different business scenarios and really start to understand in their mind which one is more important. So that's the official pitch. Now, my personal pitch on this part. Because the fact is, this is more of a BDM conversation, most of them are not going to be able to tell you what the technical complexity is. In terms of implementing something, your CFO is generally not going to have the understanding of how do you adopt, Azure or whatever else products that we're talking about. In this case, Microsoft 365. The business impact is also going to be fairly limited, right? Unless you're talking to the CEO or some sort of a C-suite person. If you're only talking to the director of marketing, they're not going to really know what the entire business impact is for the organization. They might know for their line of business, sure, but not the entire company. So to me, this is less important when you're engaging in a one-off value discovery workshop with a BDM. The next question is then why do we have this? We found it very helpful when you do need to somehow quantify the way you would prioritize the different business scenarios. I'll give you an example. What we've done with State Farm, again, State Farm is mainly a car, auto insurance, both commercial and consumer insurance company business in the United States. The SSP that we have, so our solution specialist, did multiple value discovery workshops with different line of business decision makers within that organization. It's a big, big organization in the United States. So they did multiple VDWs. What they've also done is use this process to actually quantify, hey, because we've done all these different value discovery workshops and a total of 7 different business scenarios, they needed a way to compile everything together and quantify back to the CEO who they're engaging with to say this is how we would rank them and this is how we would prioritize. So Mr. CEO, thank you so much for giving us your time on this 4 different line of business that you allow us to talk to. Based on that discussion with the 4 different businesses, these are the business conversations that we talked about that's going to impact your bottom line by XYZ. It's all literally using the value calculator. You can build up the entire thing. But not only that, we've identified 7 business scenarios that's going to make a difference based on your objectives of the company as you start to think about their mission statements, as you start to read their what we call the 10K. I think it's is that the same for UK? But they're financial statements, right? So they put out their statements every year. And these are the business scenarios that we identified will make an impact to your organization. And by the way, Mr. CEO, based on the conversations that I've had, this is what we would recommend in terms of the 7. If you only have time to think about it, these 4 are the ones that I would really be focusing on, right? And again, while this may not be accurate, at least this is what the customers put down, right? This is a way for you to use that to your advantage. It may not be accurate, but at least you're not just making stuff up, right? You're at least using some sort of a quantification methodology that the customer is putting down. So that was a strategic thing that they did, that, hey, we went through 7, but these 4 are the ones that we're going to prioritize, right? And it shows some thinking around it based on the adoption ability, technical complexity, and the business impact. Do you agree, Mr. CEO? Can we have a bigger strategy session now to talk about how we're going to be doing this? How is Microsoft 365 going to influence your entire organization? So hopefully you can see there is a reason and there is some benefit when you start to do multiple value discovery workshops into getting people to think about these 3 different buckets, because it creates some ammunition for you in the back end. For one-offs, to me, that has been less of an emphasis. Within the value discovery workshop, had I selected 2, then of course it would make sense. But because I only selected 1, this one would always be priority number 1. So again, that makes sense. So to me, this is less important. But what is more important for me at this point is this is now the end of the value discovery workshop. There's a couple different things I do want to show you here at the end that you can download. And again, when you play around with the tool, you're going to get to the end yourself. You're going to see these as well. The full workshop report is the one where we put all of the diagrams and some of the verbiage into a PowerPoint format where you can then download and send to your customer if you wanted to do it that way. I'll show you a different way to actually share the documents with your, a more preferred way to share with your customer. But let me just download it because I found it very, very helpful for me when I download a piece of content and put it on my device and actually study it afterwards. This goes back to the point on how do you know about these 18 business scenarios? Had I selected all 18, I can download all of this and read it at my own leisure, right? I don't have to depend on internet connectivity. So you can already see it basically puts everything into a PowerPoint format, right? Has you changed anything throughout the entire value discovery workshop, it would also capture that and put it in the PowerPoint. So this is for me a good internal, for myself, consumption type of purpose. What is good for the customer though is, let me go back. What is good for the customer is this personalized business proposal. Majority of our value discovery workshop that is done, people come to this one and download it, edit it, and send it to the customer. And I'll show you what that looks like once this loads. This will take all of the words and all of the verbiage that you saw throughout the entire value discovery workshop, put it into a document, and then you can of course go edit that document and then send it as a recap to the customer. This is how it looks like. So it already has the name of the customer. So for me, Mylan Laboratories is the one that I had used as an example. It's got my name here. It's got some information about quantification based on 5,000 people. Because I think that's the number that I put down for seat counts. So it's already calculated some stuff. Now here's the scenario discussion that we've built together, and here's the next step, right? So whatever it is that you had discussed with the customer, you can put that as the next step. So some people say, hey, let's do a security workshop or something. Put it here, right? And then send it to your customer. As any person who's engaging with the customer, you would always send a thank you note back, right? For a customer conversation. Thank you so much for giving me your time. Attached is a document where you're going to see some of the recap that we've talked about, as well as next steps. And by the way, copy and paste the next step. Here you go. This is what we had discussed. I highly recommend you, Mr. Customer, to do a customer immersion experience. I'm happy to set it up for next week for 30 minutes. And let me actually now show you how we can walk you through customer immersion experience using our products to solve the challenges that you just talked to me about, right? So that becomes your next point of view. And therefore, every single one of these documents you're going to see request a customer immersion experience because that becomes the next logical point. So if you think about the value discovery discussion that you had with your customer over tea and somewhere informal for 30 minutes, that was just a discussion, right? You've now spent their time learning about their challenge. Of course, the next logical step is let's actually do a customer immersion experience where we get to be in the same sandbox, and let me show you and walk you through how our Microsoft 365 is going to address those very challenges that you just talked to me about, right? So that becomes natural and that becomes normal. And again, of course, it depends on what else you've agreed to do with the customer and you want to put it on here. But this is a document that we've seen being used quite often because it's already created. All you have to do is download it. Once you go through it, in the future times, you're going to know that it basically always starts with the introduction. It copies and pastes the stuff that you've done throughout VDW, and then you just simply update the next steps that you've agreed with the customer, and boom, voila, you can send it off to the customers, and there you go. So this is the business proposal. Some of the other things that you can see over here, I'm not going to click on every single one of them. You can see there's the total economic impact study if you want to download it. That is the business study that we've done with Forrester, where Forrester went out and tried to identify what is the cost and benefit of using Microsoft 365. You can download this and send it to the customer. This goes back to the value calculator. This is the foundation for the value calculator, but throughout the value discovery workshop in the before and after process, the after process, recall there's a chart right there where it shows you at least the first glimpse of what the value calculator looks like. You can also say to the customer, hey, we actually have a study. Would you like me to send you a copy of that, right? So here it is, that copy where you can download and send to the customer. So this is all the end, and this is the end of the value discovery workshop. And again, I'll emphasize this, whether you do this process with the customer directly off your computer, online, versus a discussion, that's less important. At least for me, that's less important. To me, what's more important is at the end of a value discovery workshop, do you understand what your BDM's challenges are? If you do, that's a success because now you have something that you can follow up on later on. All right, questions. Simple, right? Fairly simple once you start to get the hang of it. It's really to help you create a framework around how to think about having a discussion with the BDM, right? It's really that. And again, going back to the reason we created this, we didn't have this type of content. So our sellers, when you ask them what I've asked you, how do you engage with the BDMs? I don't know. I don't engage with the BDMs. And we need to start to think about, well, let's create the necessary content by industry, by the roles where this business challenge related, and then use that as the framework and the structure to having that conversation with the BDM. Not to memorize everything, of course. That's not the point. Yes.
The downloads up there, can they be branded with our own branding, or do they have to stay Microsoft complete branding?
There's a way that you can upload a partner logo. The partner logo can show up. It will always be alongside Microsoft's logo as well. Now, of course, you can take the contents and transfer the contents into your own PowerPoint deck. That's also fine. We are thinking about right now, I don't know where it is on the roadmap. We are thinking about creating some sort of a VDW where you basically can put in directly into your own system so that it comes out as yours, period, without Microsoft's logo on there. But I don't know, I could find out when that is, so that is something that we've been discussing. And a lot of partners obviously will ask that. Yes? Sorry. I'm just sitting right here.
I told you, it's my exercise.
How frequently is this updated? So, for example, the 18 business scenarios aren't going to persist for eternity. So, in 6 months' time, they'll probably change.
Well, just like anything else with Microsoft, it'll change every 2 weeks. I'm just kidding. We try to keep it as relevant as possible, whatever that means. Typically, what we would see is we'll change a couple words here and there, nothing major. We're talking about words, maybe every couple weeks. I wasn't lying about that. But there's nothing, the content itself wouldn't change that much. We're talking about, rather than saying document, we'll call it doc. You know, for example, major changes that will influence the actual number of scenarios, the actual things that we talk about, typically you're looking at between 6 to 12 months that we're gonna change that. And we go through a very rigorous process where we sit down with our leadership team to say, hey, if you were engaging and think about in BDMs, what are the problems based on the new releases that we have coming? What are the problems that we should be addressing? What are the big major blockers?
Second question. So, are there any gaps from what is there today? And if there are gaps that we notice ourselves, how do we feed back into Microsoft so that that's what we improve the whole ecosystem?
Great question. So, gaps, absolutely, there are gaps, and I'll be the first to admit there's no way that we can create something that's going to fit for everybody. There's just no way. One of the feedbacks that I always get is, hey, Paul, the industry that you have doesn't align to my industry. I get that a lot. And scenario-wise, hey, Paul, I already had a good scenario in mind. It's not aligning to the 18 that you have. Is there too many or too few? You know, those type of questions do come up. 18 business scenarios a lot. We went from 10 to 18. And as you can imagine, people, the learning curve is high. So there's a lot of challenge around industry and scenarios when it comes to gaps. The best way for me to think about it is there will always be gap. There will always be gap within Value Discovery Workshop. The point that we always want to drive is, do you have enough content for you to drive that BDM discussion based on the content that we have today in there? If you're missing the content, absolutely, you should let us know. But if we're missing industries, we need to go back, and you can, of course, let us know as well, but we need to go back and understand what is the business impact that we're going to see. At the end of the day, it's an investment, just as you would invest in any programs and anything else within your own organization. If we can't justify the business impact, then it will become harder for us to add additional scenarios or industries. But yeah, there's always going to be content gaps, and we would always be hearing your feedback on it based on are we going to create a Yammer group or whatever feedback mechanism?
For them, we have the alias, the UKMS 365 alias.
Okay.
That we can use.
So there's definitely a feedback mechanism. But before I make that leap of assumption, I assumed you were talking about like content, like industry and scenarios. Is there something else that you are thinking about when it comes to gap?
Not specifically right now. Again, as I've not reviewed this, I'm not sure how complete it is and whether it maps onto the various sectors I'm looking at.
Yeah.
So I can't answer that question right now.
Okay.
But a second question I did have, so out of the 18 business scenarios, are they common across any industry, or are there 18 business scenarios per industry? So there's lots.
There's lots, so it's the latter, right? But with that in mind, remember the PowerPoint slide I was showing the 18 business scenarios? We always start with the same generic 18 business scenarios. So I think the first one said collaboration real time, something like that. So it's very generic collaboration. How do you collaborate real time with other people, right? That scenario cuts across the entire ecosystem that I can think of. All 10 major industries plus commercial industry would be thinking about that. So we always start at high enough of a level that cuts across the majority of the industries. Will there be scenarios that's more aligned to specific industries? Absolutely, absolutely. So security is going to be, security is ubiquitous across. But there's going to be times when as you start to review, there's going to be times where, we have a teamwork scenario that just doesn't work with, I don't know, operation staff. I'm making it up as I'm going. So there's going to be that, but we always start the generic scenarios. And that's the starting point that when we do edit scenarios, that is the part where we go back and think about first before we put the industry spin and the role spin on it. Yeah. Scenario is a hot one where gap does come up, and some people say there's not enough scenarios to cover my customers' problems, and we hear that a lot. Or we hear the opposite side is, Paul, you have too many scenarios. I can't learn it all. I don't know which one to pick. It randomizes my customers, and we hear that as well. There's no magic number to how many scenarios that we should be putting in. What we really do is try to drive as broad of a conversation as we can, cover as much ground without really covering the entire ocean that's out there. Hopefully with 18, it covers the majority of it. But obviously, if there's something that you feel like is a critical content that we're missing, let us know. Let us know so that we can learn from that as well.
Thank you. Alex from Vusion. Really like the tool. Think it's going to be a really powerful way of making or simplifying the process for, instead of making it a very technical talk, it can become a more of a, how Microsoft can help your business. I think that part's great. One conversation I tend to find I have a lot with partners is, right, well, we know what the client wants. We just need to work out how we get there with Microsoft. What licenses are we going to need to make sure that we can build this journey for them? I noticed that in the proposal it said that this particular scenario, Microsoft 365 E5, was what we're going to need. Is that dynamic? So depending on the scenarios, the number of people in the business, will it tell you, right, well, this is the recommended Microsoft route to go down in terms of licenses? That's
a fantastic question. So in the business proposal, you're going to see automatically we put in Microsoft 365 E5. For probably obvious reasons, we always put that there. You can, of course, go edit that. In the future state, what we aim to do is try to pull in the licensing information that they currently have. They may already be on, E1, and they want to move to E3, that we can automatically pull that data into our business proposal so that it becomes automatically populated. that takes a lot of intricate licensing network that we currently haven't built yet, but that is on the roadmap, and that is where we want to go. But you would always see Microsoft 365 E5 as the primary SKU that we're going to put on the business proposal. It would take your effort to go in and actually say, hey, rather than saying E5, it's E3 that we're going to be talking about. Or maybe it's Office 365 E3, right? Maybe not. It's not even Microsoft 365 E5.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I'm not sure if I remember there was a kind of matrix with which scenarios are better for which products.
Yeah. So that's a great call out. When we do business scenarios, let me go back to this page real fast. So when we were selecting the scenarios here, one of the things that we're going to be adding in is a products and a SKU filter. What that means is, remember when I selected here, I'll just open it up. Once I open up scenarios, there's 18 of them here. We're going to add another button somewhere on this dashboard where if you click on it, it will show you the products that we have. So and features really. So think about them as Credential Guard or Advanced ATP or something like that. Once you select or multi-select those products, what that's going to do is then dwindle down the 18 business scenarios to only the scenarios that technically will light up for those products that you selected, right? So it will help you hone in more based on what we believe and the content that we have, hone in more on the scenario that you want to drive. So to your point, if you already know that you're going to be driving, say, you're not going to be driving an E5 conversation, you're going to be driving an E3 conversation, then you obviously don't want to talk about things that might be potentially just E5 related. So that's one way that you can think about it. That's one filter that we're going to add. The other filter that we're going to add is SKU itself. All of these you can imagine have products and SKUs backed up by the scenarios. What we just need to do is light it up for you guys so that you can go in and select it. Right now you don't see it. That was a miss that we forgot to bring it over. Everything that you see here, by the way, we released literally about a week and a half ago. This new UI that we created, the Business Value Program has always been there. And for those of you who've used BVP before, logged in before through Transform, you would have seen a different UI literally a week and a half ago. So we changed the UI and translated it over to this new dashboard. And one of the things that we forgot to do, which we'll get it back in, is the little filter SKU that you could get from here. And that was a pretty big piece of feedback that people have been giving us is, hey, how do I know which products sit underneath which of these business scenarios? So we do have that, and we'll add it. So the other thing that, since I'm already back on the dashboard, the other thing that I was referring to that you can share the document with your customers. So you can share the business proposal, right? It has a professional looking document that you can directly send to the customer. You can also share with them the PowerPoint. To me, I find sharing the PowerPoint is a little bit challenging because some of the figures could be it could be misaligned. You just never know. And version control is always going to be an issue when you send a PowerPoint over. The best way to send the VDW for your customer is click on VDW, and you're going to see this little share button. So back to the question that one of the ladies had in the back. If you're working with anybody else, say an internal Microsoft person or with somebody within your organization, what you can do is share with your peer. By sharing with your peer, they can do read and write access. So they can actually help you create the value discovery workshop for you as well, or at least help you drive the thinking along. The other one, sharing with your customer, which is a read-only file, will get rid of the version control issue that you would typically see in a PowerPoint format, right? So if you were to have edited anything in the VDW and happens to share in a previous version, then this gets rid of it, right? Because this then just has the always live type of URL for your customers to take a look at. So that's another way that you can send as a recap for your customer if you want to. That's another way to share directly with your customers. Questions? Anything? Yes.
Under the scenarios, it had stars. What did the stars refer to?
Wow, you guys are picking up all the things that I didn't talk about. The stars is what we call the Amazonian star system. So the reason we have stars is we wanted to start showing which one gets picked the most. And does it drive business impact? The way we measure business impact is when you have, so we call all of the financial impact that I was talking about. When we see somebody do a VDW in the system, it's mapped to a certain account, right? If that account actually closes a deal or move in events in our sales journey within our dynamic CRM system, we start to see, hey, this scenario might be more relevant for this customer. The more we see it and the more deals that we close based on a specific scenario, the more stars you get. So that's how we think about it. Now, obviously, we're not making the statement of saying if you drive this one or this one, you will have a much better impact. But that's sort of a way that you can start to evaluate which one do you think you want to drive the conversation, which ones have people seen success in. That's another way that you can think about it as well. That's the Amazonian star rating system that we just released in July. And again, it's based on machine learning. There's nobody I'm not there clicking on the stars and trying to influence one or the other. It's just based on machine learning. Do we see more of it being used? Does it get closed? And the more of that we see, the more stars we give it. What else? Anything else? Yes.
Thanks. Just a quick one. I think you mentioned it earlier, but does this plug into the Microsoft Demos system at all?
Does this plug into Microsoft Demo system? It doesn't. So you can use demos for the customer immersion experience portion of it. We're going to touch on it a little bit. Before we go too far, Microsoft Demos, are people familiar with it? Have anybody who doesn't know about Microsoft Demos? Okay, so Microsoft Demos is, in Microsoft, there's different ways that we demonstrate our products. You can come to an MTC right here. We can do an EBC. We can do a CIE. We have so many acronyms. We can do A, B, C, D, E, F, all of that. And then there's this thing called Microsoft Demos as well, where you can go and get a tenant for yourself so that you can set up the tenant, you can go in and set up all the processes, all the paperwork, all the contents that you want directly within that tenant so that when you sit in front of a customer, you can demonstrate our products. So that's Microsoft Demos. Virtual CIE, or CIE in general, I think about it in a different way. A CIE to me is more about bringing the customer along on this journey. So demos doesn't allow the customers to go into the tenant, right? It's really a show. Let me show you how Microsoft product looks like. However, with CIE, I'm actually going to be inviting the customer into the tenant so that we can do co-editing together. We can see the same thing together. They can actually play around with the tool afterwards as well. So with that said, to answer your question, no, it doesn't. The things that we do in BDW doesn't plug into demos. Can you use Microsoft Demos to demonstrate our products, to showcase the challenges and how to solve that? Yeah, sure, of course, you can do that. But it doesn't create that linkage. If you want to create the linkage, you would have to use the tools that we have here, which is customer immersion experience. All right, so what time is lunch? 11:45. 11:45? So we are almost there. So why don't I go back to this? So I won't go into the next topic. So keep in mind, we spent some time talking about Value Discovery Workshop. That is typically the meat, the most important thing that people don't have a sort of a baseline knowledge on. Even when we talk to internal sellers or internal marketers here within Microsoft, that is typically the part where we need the most strengths and training on. So we spent some time talking about a Value Discovery Workshop. After lunch, we're going to touch on customer immersion experience, and then I'll demonstrate what the value calculator and IT roadmap looks like as well. And that will then sum up the entire business value program for you so that by the time when you exit out of here, you're going to learn not only about the different tools that we have in BVP, but also some of the programs that we are running today as well. And so we're going to be touching on all of this, but I know it's sort of awkward. 11:45, you said? So I'll be right here. Any questions, final questions before we go on break? Yeah.
In Microsoft's experience of using this program, at what point do you engage with IT, or do you engage with IT in the program at all? Or when would you recommend having a conversation in parallel?
That's good. So when do you engage with IT? So for me, when I think about it, it will always be a parallel path, that we don't neglect the BDMs, but as we engage with IT folks, we should be engaging with BDMs using these tools. So continue down the path that you already have with the IT folks, but if you find that you need to get engaged with the BDMs, this is a great tool. Within this program itself, the very, very right-hand side, the IT roadmap, you will see today in the afternoon, you will see that is more of a IT conversation, and you can certainly leverage this tool to drive the IT conversation. But in general, I would say it's in parallel path, and that is typically how we think about it as well within Microsoft.